Hi, my name is Abby Lee and I'm a second year War Studies and History student at King's College London. I have undergone a BizG's internship, which I first found out about through the War Studies department, where I have written an article, developed an infographic aimed at sharing information visually, and a podcast. These articles are aimed at making content for Gen Z that will stick with them to make important issues more accessible and impactful. The prompt was to write about post-conflict communities and the issues that affect them, which gives an opportunity to focus on more studies on a human level and the effect that they experience from conflict. Often in war studies, we focus on the political or theoretical side of conflict, so I wanted to take this opportunity to research more about the effects of conflict on individuals. I also liked the emphasis on post-conflict. I think that the news tends to shine light on countries experiencing conflict, and then when the conflict is over, they move on to the next piece of news, so I don't think they properly look into the lasting effects of conflict. It's important to remember that conflicts aren't just statistics, but they are traumatic experiences that shape people's lives and communities for years to come, and the effect of conflict on the individual can be huge. I've never written in a journalistic style before, so it was an interesting challenge to have to steer away from academic writing and towards a more accessible and understandable piece of work. I found it to be a good experience, and I would like to explore this way of writing a little bit more in the future. So my interest in war studies comes from a place of wanting to help and an interest in the humanitarian side of conflict. I want to go into a career working with post-conflict or disadvantaged communities, and so when I saw this internship advertised, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to explore this interest. I'm particularly interested in the experience of women and children in these situations and how their experience can be drastically different to men, often at the hands of men, which leads on to why I decided to focus on gender-based violence. The increase of gender-based violence following conflict can be seen across the world, and I chose gender-based violence as a topic because it is a critical issue exacerbated by conflict. My personal experiences and observations of inequality and gender-based violence in the UK means that I can develop more of an understanding of these issues, however, obviously on a much smaller scale. This does drive my commitment to sharing the experiences of women who face much more extreme challenges as the fear that they experience on their day-to-day lives due to their lack of protection and safety, and the risk that they're at in every day is just unimaginable. When I was in the researching phase of my internship, I looked at different regions such as Rwanda before ultimately deciding to focus on Iraq. By doing this, I could look at how these patterns of gender-based violence manifest in different cultural contexts. So in Rwanda, for example, women face the politicization of sexual violence and the use of it as a weapon during genocide. But I decided to focus on Iraq because of the lasting effects post-conflict and the legislative failures that allow for the continued abuse of women and girls. I wanted to create more of an in-depth piece that would explore gender-based violence in Iraq in more detail, because then I can go into more of the different regions. For example, I talk about the Kurdish region of northern Iraq. This allowed me to just go into it in more detail rather than focusing on multiple locations or multiple countries in less depth. So Iraq has faced decades of conflict. So there's the Iran-Iraq War in 1980 to 1988, the Gulf War in 1990 to 1991, which was following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. the US invasion of Iraq in 2003, which did topple Saddam Hussein's regime, but did lead to the destabilization of the country, and then the war with ISIS in 2013 to 2017. So these long periods of conflict mean that people have grown up surrounded by violence, leading to prolonged exposure, and men have been encouraged to fight, which brings the normalization of violence and aggressive behaviour. War tends to exaggerate traditional gender roles, as men are more likely to take up arms and women are more likely to stay on the home front. So this creates a power imbalance between men and women, which leads to an increase in gender-based violence that lasts even when the conflict has ended. I was particularly interested in Iraq because of the Iraqi penal code and how it contains exceptions that enable gender-based violence to continue. So I go further into this in the article, but for crimes such as honour killings, perpetrators are given mitigated sentences. The idea that murderers can be given lenient sentences because their victims brought shame to their family is just so unjust and unfair. It is rooted in misogyny and only allows for further violence against women and girls. Not only this, but many survivors of gender-based violence face stigma and isolation and cannot access the shelter and the aid that they so desperately need. In my article, I aim to raise awareness about these systemic issues and the need for social and legal reforms to protect the rights of women and girls and to hold abusers accountable. So some of the key points that I would like my readers to take away from the article is, first of all, just an awareness of the situation of persistent gender-based violence despite an end to active conflict. Although as an outsider, I can only do so much, I think it is really important to raise awareness for these issues. I think it's important to increase knowledge of how conflict can exacerbate traditional gender roles and normalise violence, which results in gender-based violence. Also, I wanted to spread an awareness of the legal frameworks, so an understanding about how Iraq's legal system enables and perpetuates gender-based violence through not providing protections and having laws that prevent justice. More awareness of the lack of shelter that survivors receive and the problems that this comes with. And also there's a need to view it as a larger issue. Obviously, gender-based violence in post-conflict communities does not just exist in Iraq, but in other countries around the world that have been through conflict. Another key point that I'd like my readers to take away is the need for empathy and for anger. Tiba al-Ali's story, which I go into in the article, serves as a harsh reminder of the effects of gender-based violence, and it creates a call for empathy and anger towards the injustices that she and so many others face. I think that the world would be a better place if people expressed more empathy for others, and not only empathy but anger for survivors of gender-based violence because of the justice that they are not receiving but so badly deserve. It is easy to become desensitized, I think, to the news and the media about conflict because it can be seen as that it's far away and people cannot fully connect with it. So I hope that this article sparks more of a want for change and to help, because I believe that change is possible with collective action and collective anger. So thank you so much for listening to my podcast, and I hope you enjoy the article.